Hello and welcome to the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. I'm Jack Morgan alongside me, Dylan Pfister. And today, the Duquesne Dukes will be taking on the Dayton Flyers at home at the UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse. It's going to be yet another big test for this Duquesne Dukes team. Dylan, Duquesne comes off another win at home, and they have been impressive to start this conference play. They sit at 4-1. They are fourth in the A10. What has gone right for them since the start of conference play?
Truly, Jack, when I look at the results of these games, it really is just that team effort for the Dukes. And we really are seeing a season that is shades of last year for this Dukes team. They started off slow, started to pick up a couple conference wins. And similar to that point, it really was a team mentality last year that got them to that point. Now just looking at the St. Bonaventure game, every single player on the active roster for the Dukes made a bucket from the field in that game.
Yeah.
It's a huge accomplishment for them, showing that they don't need one player to go off. They can win in a multitude of ways.
And we saw on Saturday a heck of a crowd. A lot of Dukes fans out there. You heard a pop when Netchus had that huge block. A number of plays that were, you can't even count your finger. Just a great crowd. They were loving it. Tonight against Dayton, probably going to be more of the same, you'd have to think, correct?
I love that you pointed that out, Jack, because you're right. They're going to need an atmosphere to beat this Dayton Flyers team. And a Flyers team that is very familiar with a strong atmosphere of their own.
Yes.
Dayton, of their 6 losses this year, 5 of them were on the road or at a neutral site.
Yeah.
And that goes to show, the impact that stadium, that we know about the Flyers stadium capacity. Yep. They lead the A10 in attendance this season, almost doubling the next team in line. Yep. So, surely that goes to show you what kind of factor that is on their team and on a weekly basis. So coming into the Cooper Fieldhouse is going to be big for them. It's going to be interesting to see how they can respond to that energy that the Duquesne campus seems to bring to the Flyers every time they come to town.
You also see the Flyers fans travel pretty well. And Bonaventure, they traveled pretty well on Saturday. Obviously not enough. Dukes fans got the last laugh, but Dayton fans, it seems a little bit different. And it hits different with this Dayton team. They have a lot of weapons. They are a very good team. And at the center of it all, or closest center of it all year has been Posh Alexander. He's a game-time decision. That is a big deal. And if he does not end up going, Dayton's going to have to look elsewhere. But luckily for them, they have a lot of options to look to.
Yeah, they are going to have to look elsewhere, Jack. Alexander Posh, like you said, averages 22 minutes a game, second on the team in assists. So he contributes a lot in the facilitating game, so they will have to look elsewhere. They're going to have to look to Malachi Smith. He's second in the entire A10 in assists.
Yeah.
So if their second best facilitator isn't going to be there, they're going to need Malachi Smith to have a big game, make up for the both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dayton now, coming into this year, in non-conference play, had a lot of big wins. But it's also notable, they're without Deron Holmes, obviously, who graduated, went to the NBA. It just feels like, obviously you might be missing Holmes a little bit, but they have so much star power. They're able to overcome that. It just feels like they are a team that has a great chance. And they've had a good chance at at large bid, rather, at the NCAA tournament, but this start to conference play has really put that in jeopardy, Dylan.
Yeah, you talk about conference play. It's an interesting one for them, Jack, because again, it's the big win against Loyola Chicago, but they were 1-3 to start conference play before that win a few days ago.
That was an overtime.
That was
a tight one.
That was a tight one. We did see 15 points from Malachi Smith. We saw 26 points from Cheeks, but again, that type of performance isn't going to come every game for them. They need to be consistent in conference play down the stretch. It's not just going to be those out-of-conference wins that do it for them. We've
talked about on the last couple pregame shows for the Dukes. It feels like they're starting to pick things up. They're starting to pick up some steam. They're hot. They're a hot basketball team. And the A10 has been just chaotic. One of the only, teams that have really stuck with what their non-conference record said about them has been VCU. And yes, George Mason, but VCU had a Now, VCU had a pretty solid non-conference schedule. Dayton's was obviously better, but tough to beat Dayton's non-conference schedule the way things shook out for them. But you should look at the A-10. It seems like there's a lot of opportunity here for the Dukes heading into the tournament. A lot of good teams they have beaten towards the top of that table, and they're really looking primed for a good seed heading into the A-10 tournament, which would pay a lot of dividends.
Certainly, Jack. And I'm not just saying this because we cover the Dukes every game here. They are hot. They have the second best conference record in the A-10. They're ranked 4th overall, and they dominated in that St. Bonaventure game.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a win. You and I sat here at this desk thinking it was going to be a 5-10 point
I had
game.
Bonaventure.
I also had St. Bonaventure, but it didn't go that way. The Dukes dominated. The score in the first half was 38-29. The second half score was 37-28, practically the same.
Yeah.
Dominant in both halves. They shut down the Bonnies' 3-point attempts all game. So Dayton's going to really need to light it up on offense. Specifically, Nate Santos needs to have a big game. He leads the team in threes. Going to be important for him down the stretch because, like you said, Jack, Duquesne is hot.
And it feels like Santos has stepped into a little bit of a bigger role, obviously with Holmes gone, as well as Kobe Brea, who is doing a lot of great things over at Kentucky. It's fun to watch, but so is SEC basketball as a whole. It's great. Regardless, they have a lot of guys that can contribute, but Duquesne does have that as well, as we've seen. We saw a little bit of an emergence so far this year with guys like Crawford, Dinkins, Chabi Beret, a lot of guys that are really getting things done for the Dukes offensively and defensively.
Yeah, I just talked about the importance of the 3-point shooting for Dayton in this game, but Cam Crawford for the Dukes, 4th in the A-10 in 3-point percentage. He's been on target. And then Trey Dinkins is 5th in the A-10 in 3-pointers made. So not only have they been accurate, but they're putting them up at a decent rate. Kareem Rozier still sitting in that top 10. Now he's all the way up to 5th in the NCAA rankings for assist-to-turnover ratio. So
6 spots.
Kareem Rozier not slowing down anytime soon. You talked about those new guys. They're only getting better. This is a very promising Duquesne team.
Yep, and we would be remiss without talking about the fact that they have a guy like Jake DeMichael coming back hopefully soon. We heard from Drew Joyce that he had hit a setback in his recovery. He was supposed to come back, that the goal was for him to come back during the GW game. However, he's back in that boot. No timetable known as of right now. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit of a better timetable as the week progresses, but as of right now, the Dukes are without DeMichael, but once they get him back, it might be a little bit of an adjustment, getting him back in the right spot on the team in the rotation, but that's going to be a big punch they have to add towards what looks like will now be the end of A-10 conference play.
Yeah, surely DeMichael will be a big addition for these Dukes. I felt like he was almost that big storyline, that big name coming into this season.
Yeah.
Now with the success in conference play, I feel like a lot of fans have almost started to forget about him. But don't
It's
worry,
easy to.
Don't worry. Jake DeMichael will make you remember his name very soon with these Dukes.
Absolutely. I mean, he was a pretty consistent part of the team, even when they were struggling early. That was one of the few bright spots, because there wasn't many. I'll say that much. However, we're going to move into our players to watch here. And Dylan, for Dayton, obviously there's quite a plethora of choices. Who are you going with?
There are many choices for Dayton, Jack, but my flyer to watch, just kind of mentioned him a little bit, is going to be Nate Santos. And it's for the specific reason I looked at his numbers from the last game. Now, this guy's leading, like I said, leads the team in threes, but he also leads in points per game, almost 15 for him on the year. But he only had 7 points against Loyola Chicago. That was his lowest going all the way back to November 16th. He hadn't had a game with single digits since then. So I'm expecting a big rebound game from Nate Santos, not necessarily in rebounds, but more in the shooting game. Yeah. I think he's going to put on a show for the Flyers.
I think that there's a couple of guys that you can go with here for Dayton, like I said. However, I don't think we brought up Zed Key's name, but it feels like inside he has played a really good brand of basketball. And if you watch Dayton, it's tough to ignore the tenacity and ferociousness he plays with. He comes from Ohio State, and he is a grad student. The transfer from OSU, like I said, he has a lot that he brings to the table. veteran experience, that ferociousness I talked about, and also defensive production. He's really produced on the defensive end. I think he's going to need to. Obviously, Duquesne has felt a lot of help from Dave Dixon. Eli Wilborn has started to play really well. Chabi, like we've talked about for the whole season so far, it feels like has played well. They're going to need a guy to neutralize that. I think Zedke is going to have to be the guy for the Dayton Flyers. And speaking of the Dukes, let us go into our players to watch for Duquesne. I mentioned the few centers. Is it going to be any of those three, or are we going elsewhere?
I'm going for Trey Dinkins. I think the Dukes need a strong offensive performance. It's simple as that. I think these two sides are going to go back and forth. And who's been that offensive firepower for the Dukes? It's been first year Trey Dinkins the third. I think he's going to have a great game. Thinking 20 plus, maybe 25 against the Flyers.
I think that you were right, and I think last year at the Coop, we talked about this in the last pregame show, it felt like they just didn't have enough offensive production, and they really had a chance of winning that game. However, they did not because they didn't get enough production. You are absolutely right on with that. And I'm going to go down that same vein, and I'm going to go with Cam Crawford. I feel like he has hit some big-time buckets. He had a stretch in the prior game against St. Bonaventure where the lead was cut to 5, and he rattled off 7 unanswered points on his own to bring that lead back to 10 by that first media timeout, and Duquesne did not look back from then. The lead never got closer than it did at 5 points. So I think Cam Crawford produces some big buckets for Duquesne at multiple stages of this season, and I think he's going to have to in this game for Duquesne to come away with what would be a humongous victory. Will they get that victory, though? That is where we come in. We're going to give you our game predictions, starting with you, Dylan. Who do you got winning this battle?
When I look at these two teams, I look at the Duquesne 9-9 and then Dayton 12-6, and that tells its own story. But then you look at the conference record, and those are the most recent games.
They've struggled.
Duquesne is 4-1, Dayton's 2-3. I'm done doubting the Dukes.
All right.
I think they win with a
With
strong performance at home, beat the Flyers, and move to 5-1 in the conference. Going the Dukes win 80-75.
You know, as much as I would like to take Duquesne, I think for this whole year and the good amount of A-10 basketball I've watched, specifically Dayton Flyers basketball, it feels like they're just so good. Even when they lost to GW, it just always felt like once they got a bucket, their whole crowd, which was pretty much almost half of the GW audience a couple weeks ago, which was incredible. They travel really well. And I think that it just feels every time they get a couple buckets in a row, you're like, uh-oh. You don't really feel that with any other team, at least for me. I think that's what makes them so feared, makes them so good. I think that they're going to win this one in a tight one. I don't think Duquesne's going to get the doors blown off of them. I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere. Personally, can't wait to be there at the Coop on Tuesday night. Obviously, you hope for a Duquesne win if you're a Dukes fan, but you obviously have to look at Dayton with a lot of respect because they are a great team. We'll see if Duquesne's able to get the job done. Thank you so much for watching Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. For Dylan Pfister, I'm Jack Morgan saying so long and enjoy the game.